Hello again, and welcome to Lesson 7, which is on opinion essays. So opinion essays are very common on the IELTS test, and there are lots of different essays where you need to put in your opinion, and then there are specific essays referred to as opinion essays where the entire focus of the essay is what your opinion is about a certain subject or about a certain point of view, and that should be the entire focus of what you write. Now, on the surface, it sounds quite simple. Giving your opinion is simply explaining what you believe and why you believe it. So it seems like an easy enough task, but there are a couple of reasons why you need to pay careful attention to certain aspects of this type of question. Like lots of things in IELTS, one of those reasons is the poor information available on the internet. So there's a lot of confusion about a couple of aspects, which I'm going to go into detail about. And if you don't have the correct information and you don't respond in the correct way, there can be serious negative effect to your score, especially if you need a higher score like Band 7 or Band 8, especially Band 8. Now, there are different formats of opinion questions, but they're all essentially the same. They're all asking you the same thing, which is, to give your opinion about something, a situation, a point of view, a situation, or a point of view. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about those two main points of confusion that can lower your score. We're going to look at some different examples of the different formats of IELTS questions for the opinion type. And then we're going to look at a specific example of a full essay, a full response to one opinion question, which is the information which you can find under the lesson notes on the website. So the confusion about how to respond or what type of information you should include in an opinion essay has to do with two aspects. Number one, taking a middle position, and number two, mentioning the other point of view or the other side of the argument. So let's start with taking a middle position. These are two separate things, but they're somewhat connected. You've probably heard most IELTS teachers recommend that you either agree or disagree. Don't take a position in the middle. So if you think about your opinion, it could be on a spectrum. So on one end, your opinion 100% or completely agrees with something. On the other end, your opinion 100% or completely disagrees with the same thing. And in the middle, there's lots of different variations, gradations of agreeing and disagreeing at the same time. So the reason that most teachers will tell you not to take this middle position is a good one. All you need to do is give a clear position, and a clear position can be either that you completely agree or that you completely disagree. And there's no real benefit to taking this middle position, partially agreeing, other than you will kind of discuss both sides. That is a benefit, but there are easily other ways to do this. And by taking a middle position, you can often end up writing an essay where your position is not clear. And it kind of sounds like a discussion essay. You're talking about two points of view, but you're not giving your own opinion in relation to these views clearly. So that's a problem. So again, taking a middle position can cause you problems, and there are other ways to get the benefits that you would get from doing this. Now, there are several types of IELTS questions for opinions, and the way they ask you to give your opinion is important. So there's one particular one you probably recognize as, to what extent do you agree or disagree? Okay, they could also ask you, what's your opinion about this? Is this a positive or negative development? Do you agree or disagree? But particularly for to what extent do you agree or disagree? Do you agree or disagree? These questions, you can very easily completely agree or completely disagree. And if you get the question that says, to what extent do you agree or disagree, it's really important that you use this word completely. I completely agree, I completely disagree. And you can also use this for, do you agree or disagree, depending on how the question is asked, what's your opinion about this? So saying I completely agree or I completely disagree can be used in all of these situations. And I would do it that way simply because it will be more consistent and you'll be less likely to forget this important word. It's not as important in the other opinion essay types. To what extent do you agree or disagree? That's the one where it's really important. And if you don't do that, you'll have a problem with your score. So this, again, is taking the middle position, something I wouldn't recommend that you do because of the problems associated with it. But that you should make it clear that you're not doing that by saying completely agree or completely disagree. Positive, negative development questions and some of the other ways opinion questions are asked, you wouldn't use this phrase, I completely agree or disagree, because it's not appropriate. But for any question where they're specifically asking you, do you agree? You can use it, and I would recommend that you do that. Now, so that's taking the middle position. The other point of confusion, and this one is more serious, is about mentioning the other side or discussing the other side of the argument. What you'll hear a lot of people say is that you don't need to do this. So you shouldn't take a middle position and you don't need to discuss the other side of the argument. It really depends on what score you need. So if you need a score above 7, you absolutely do need to mention the other side of the argument. And just generally speaking, when you are giving your opinion, justifying your opinion, supporting your opinion, giving an opinion where you don't even mention the other side is much less effective than giving one where you show that you've considered the other side in coming to your own opinion. So you've decided that, okay, yeah, that's true, but that's not relevant in this particular situation, and that's why I think this. Or yes, there are people who believe that, but they're wrong for this reason. So again, explaining the other side in the context of your own opinion. This is not taking a middle position and saying that you agree with partially with the other side. It's simply acknowledging that there is another side and dealing with the objections from that side. So people who would not agree with you, they would say X. And what you're saying is, that doesn't really matter because my opinion is this and I've thought about that already. That's not important in this context. So remember, if you need a very high score, it's absolutely essential that you do mention the other side. And there are different ways you can do this. So in the essay that I'm going to show you today on the opinion type question, I'll show one way you can mention the other side in a sort of very subtle way, in a not very, very direct way. And if you watch the lesson on advantages and disadvantages essay, you'll see a more clear-cut way of referring to the other side and explaining why it's not really correct or why it's not really relevant to the particular issue. But for now, just remember that taking a middle position is still not a good idea, that you need to say that you completely agree or disagree, and that you should make some reference in your argument to the other side, so to the people who disagree with you. So if you agree with the point, to the people who disagree with the point. If you disagree with the point, you should make some reference to the people who agree with the point, again, in the context of explaining why that is not relevant to your opinion, why you've considered that and you still have the opinion that you do, or why it's not correct. Now, this is not my opinion. This is direct from Cambridge. This is not something that people should agree or disagree about. This is a fact. So there are several sources of information about this. So number one, if you look in Cambridge 13, you will see a to what extent do you agree or disagree essay that's given band 7 for task response. And the examiner comments say the response is correct in the sense that the writer has discussed both sides of the opinion, okay? I'll talk a little bit more about that particular question later, but that is directly from Cambridge, the correct way to do it, to discuss both sides. Again, they don't mean taking a middle position, they mean mentioning the other side, acknowledging the other side, balancing what your opinion is with what you've considered from the other side. That's really important. So that's directly from Cambridge. I've also seen a response that someone wrote to the Cambridge help desk, the exam section, asking this question: do I need to consider both sides of the question in my response? And the answer, again, which came from Cambridge, was yes, you need to consider both sides in your response. Again, think about the wording, consider both sides. That doesn't mean you need to partially agree. It means that you need to show that you have thought about both sides. So there's more evidence. And the final evidence is, so I'm no longer an examiner, but I have friends, former colleagues who are examiners, including people who are currently writing examiners. And they have also said that, yes, this is true. You know, if you don't state the degree to which you agree or disagree, you're limited to band 6 in task response. And if you need more than 7 in task response, you've absolutely got to mention the other side. Again, you don't have to partially agree. You have to acknowledge, discuss, show that you've considered the other side. This is just a good thing to do in writing. It makes your argument clearer, more well thought out, balanced, and it shows that you've considered all sides of the problem before coming to any conclusion about your own opinion, which is just logical thinking and good writing. So again, if someone tells you that you don't need to mention the other side, you should only talk about one side, that's just simply wrong. This is a point that unfortunately we can't agree or disagree about. It's just wrong. Normally I'm pretty flexible about things because there are so many ways to meet the band descriptors and so many different ways to consider various aspects of writing. But on this point, there is no disagreement, and it's simply a fact that you've got to do what I've just described. And if you don't, there will very likely be a seriously negative impact on your task response score, which if you have a significant negative impact on any one of the criteria, most likely that's going to cause serious problems in your ability to pass the writing test. So keep those things in mind as we talk about some of the different formats of opinion questions, and make sure you think about this while you're practicing and of course doing the exam. So let's have a look at some of the questions. So here we go. Some people believe that nowadays we have too many choices. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? You might want to pause your video, think about how you would respond to this, what's important to do in your answer, and then unpause when you're ready to check. So this is the question from Cambridge 13, where the examiner comments mention the correct approach is to mention both sides. Now, if you go and look, it's a student essay that's been written, and this particular student actually takes a position of partial agreement. So they mention some aspects of life where we don't have too many choices and some aspects of life where we do have too many choices. So they're partially agreeing, and doing so, they have mentioned both sides of the question. Like I said, that's not the only way to do it, and many students, when they do this, will have a problem making their position clear. So it's not clear that they're partially agreeing. It just seems like they're kind of discussing both sides without taking a position one way or the other. So again, if you read that essay, you'll see quite clearly, I think the points in favor of too many choices, like the agreement that there are too many choices has to do with entertainment options, and the disagreement about too many choices is about food generally. There's a couple of other ideas in the essay, but that's essentially, this is where this information comes from. So if you look at this, just look at the question, first of all, really important word, too many. So too many is negative. Too difficult is negative. Too easy is negative. Too fast, too slow. Again, these things, the fact that the word too is present means that there's a negative aspect of it. Because of whatever quality, in this case, the number of choices, there's some negative aspect to life because of that. So anytime you see the word too, the quality that follows the word too, it's assumed that that is negative. So basically the question is asking you, the number of choices that we have in life today, could be about anything, is such that it has a negative effect on us. And to what extent do you agree or disagree? Again, you have to decide. Think about all the different things you have choice in: entertainment, food, types of jobs that you could do, places to get your news, places to buy clothes, places to go shopping, varieties of information on the internet. Like any example is fine as long as it's relevant to, it's something with a lot of choices, and that's either representing your opinion that no, there aren't too many choices, it's a good thing that we have so many choices, or yeah, I agree, there are too many choices and this is having a negative effect. So whatever ideas you have, it's got to be related to those two things. The number of choices that we have is high, and that either is or is not something negative. And for most opinion questions that you get, the idea of using a 4-paragraph structure generally works quite well. So, you know, traditional introduction, traditional conclusion, 2 body paragraphs where you talk about 2 overall sort of ideas in favor of your opinion, which either agrees with the point or disagrees with the point. So again, you could choose either side, say that you completely agree and completely disagree, and then give 2 reasons, overall reasons why, and develop those each in a separate body paragraph. So that generally works for every opinion question type. Different people might approach it differently. There are probably ways that you could do it with a different number of body paragraphs, with a different structure, but again, make things easy for yourself. Do them the same way every time, as long as that way of doing them is effective in every instance. So remember, your introduction is simply introducing what the topic is and saying what you're going to do in the essay. Any way that you do that is fine, as long as it's clear Your conclusion is simply reminding the reader what you think and why you think it. So your introduction and conclusion, they're not really that important. You don't get, well, they are important, but you don't get a high score from your introduction or your conclusion. You get a high score from what you do with the development of your ideas, and that occurs in the body paragraph. So again, you would think of 2 reasons why you completely agree or completely disagree and develop those clearly. All right, here's another question. So pause your video, have a look, think how you would respond. Think about this idea of completely agreeing, disagreeing. Is that appropriate for this particular type of question? And when you're ready, unpause your video. So with the popularity of social media nowadays, many people are choosing to meet and socialize online rather than in person. Is this a positive or negative development? So that question, is this a positive or negative development? They're just asking you, how do you see this? Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? So you can imagine whatever your opinion is, you can imagine other people who disagree with you. If you think it's positive, you can imagine somebody who disagrees and thinks that it's negative, or vice versa. So again, taking one side will make your life a lot easier, and thinking of 2 reasons for your body paragraphs, 1 reason for the first and 1 reason for the second, why you think it's a positive development that people do this, again, meet and socialize online rather than in person, or why it's negative. Any relevant ideas that you have about this are fine. But in terms of this statement, I completely agree or I completely disagree, which you would use for do you agree or disagree, to what extent do you agree or disagree, that's not really appropriate here, because they're not asking you, do you agree with a certain statement? They're asking you to say whether a situation is beneficial or not. Again, that's your opinion. So you would say something like, I believe that this is a positive development, or I strongly believe that this is a negative development for 2 reasons, or I strongly believe this is a positive development because it allows people a wider circle of friends and it allows people to contact each other more easily. Something like that. So those are all ways you could introduce a topic and what you're going to do in the essay. Your body paragraphs, again, you talk about those 2 aspects, whichever 2 aspects you've decided to mention, and your conclusion, reminding us what you think, why you think it. So again, this is an opinion essay, and you don't need to have 1 paragraph about why it's positive and 1 paragraph about why it's negative. That's similar to taking a middle position, but you should acknowledge or mention the other side in the ways that I do it later in the lesson in the sample essay. Here's another one. Do you agree or disagree? So pause your video, have a think, and unpause when you're ready to check your ideas. Some people say that in all levels of education, from primary schools to universities, too much time is spent on learning facts and not enough on learning practical skills. Do you agree or disagree? So first of all, do you agree or disagree? We can say, I completely agree, or I completely disagree. Okay, so that wording works with this type of question. Now, what is it that we're agreeing or disagreeing about? Learning facts versus learning practical skills. Practical skills are things like learning how to cook, how to do automobile repairs, how to be financially literate, how to use a spreadsheet on a computer. So these kinds of practical skills that people would find useful in their life. And so what you've got to decide is, do schools spend too much, again, too much is bad, too much time learning facts? So they're spending so much time learning facts that it has a negative effect somehow. And that negative effect, according to this question, is that there's not enough time for practical skills. So one side of the question, we spend too much time learning facts and we don't spend enough time learning practical skills. The other side, no, we don't spend too much time learning facts for whatever reason. Facts are important, or we do spend enough time learning practical skills. So again, however you respond to the question is fine. Just completely agree with one side or the other. Introduce the topic and discuss your 2 ideas in a separate body paragraph, and you should be fine. Okay, so here's the last one. This one's a bit of a strange one. Pause your video, have a look, and think about how you would respond. So this is a question from IELTS.org. In Britain, when someone gets old, they go to live in a home with other old people where there are nurses to look after them. Sometimes the government has to pay for this care. Who do you think should pay for this care, the government or the family? Okay, so essentially you're being asked to choose one of 2 options. It's better for the government to pay for the care, or it's better for the family to pay for the care. Okay, and again, you would think of 2 reasons why it's better for the family to pay for the care, or 1 reason why it's better for the family to pay for the care, and 1 reason why the government really can't pay for the care. So again, 2 reasons why it's better for the family or easier for the family to pay for the care. Or if you choose the other option, you should talk about 2 reasons why the government should pay for the care, or 1 reason why the government should and why families can't, or why it's difficult for families. So again, either of those scenarios are offering support for the opinion that you're choosing one over the other. Logically speaking, maybe in real life you might have an opinion where you could see both sides. Like, it would be good for the government to pay for the care in these situations and for family to pay for the care in these situations. That's quite difficult to do in 40 minutes and 250 words. So just make your life easier and choose one or the other. Now, in terms of this, I completely agree, that's not really appropriate here. So you're not being asked to agree with one side or the other. You're being asked to choose one side and explain why you think that side is the better option. I strongly believe the government should pay for the care for 2 reasons. Or I believe the family should pay for the care because it offers them more choice and can better cater to different families' differing needs. Something like that. So introducing the topic in a way that you explain what the topic is, what you're going to do in your essay. I believe, I strongly believe, you wouldn't say, I completely agree, because that's not what you're being asked to do in the wording of the question. So again, if you just follow this process of reading the question carefully, making sure you understand exactly what the meanings of the words and the phrases are and what it's asking you to do, you won't have any problems. So you wouldn't come up with this, I completely agree or disagree, because it's not appropriate for the wording of the question. As long as you're thinking, you'll do okay. Okay, so let's have a look at the material on the website. So if you scroll down under the video, there's quite a lot of information here about this type of essay, but specifically there is one question here. As computers are being used more and more in education, there will soon be no role for the teacher in the classroom. To what extent do you agree or disagree? So maybe pause your video, think about how you would approach this if you haven't seen the question before, and then we'll talk about each part of the essay. So what I was thinking about when I wrote my response to this question in that particular moment was the difference between the information that you can get from computers and the internet and the information of what a teacher does. And I almost decided not to use this question because I thought, okay, I'm a teacher, so I have a bit of an advantage with how I think about this. But again, I've tailored my response to my own background, and anybody who's taking the IELTS test is at least a student and has some ability to think about teaching and learning in a way that they can give a convincing point of view. So if you look at what did I do in the introduction, did I introduce the topic and say what I'm going to do? So as technology has a greater and greater influence on education, there are those who argue that the role of the teacher will soon be obsolete. I completely disagree with this point of view because teachers are in fact an essential part of technology-based education. So I've said that there is this viewpoint that teachers are not going to be needed in the future, and I disagree with that, and I've given a sort of general reason. So that's something that there's a bit of confusion about. Sometimes people say you have to give your outline of your ideas. You can, it's fine, but as long as you say what you're going to do and do it, you'll be fine. So what I've said I'm going to do is I completely disagree with this opinion, and the reason is because teachers are a part of technology-based education. So they're imagining a situation in the future where technology has even more of a role than it does today, and therefore teachers won't be needed. And my answer is that teachers will be needed in that situation also. Now, what we should expect is that I'm going to go over that in greater detail in the next 2 paragraphs. And remember, we're going to talk about ways you can acknowledge the other point of view, mention the other point of view. You might do this when you write already. Lots of people do. It's just that you need to realize that if you don't do it, it's something that's important for this type of question, and it's generally something which will improve your score, improve your response to the questions in any opinion question. So No one doubts the benefits of the unprecedented access to information that the technology in today's classroom offers. So here I'm saying, yes, you're right. Computers in the classroom do offer a great benefit for education. So I'm not disagreeing with that. So that's one way of acknowledging the other side. So someone who disagrees with me and says that there's no role for teachers would say that, one of the reasons we don't need teachers is because we'll have this great access to information from the internet and from computers. And I'm saying, yeah, we will. You're right. But I still don't agree with you. And now I'm going to explain why. So, however, access to information is only a small part of the education process. And what happens in the classroom, be it traditional or virtual, is essential for the development of skills and knowledge. So I'm saying, regardless of the fact that we have this great access to information, teaching and learning is more than access to information. And that's why the other things that happen in the classroom are essential to learning, and teachers will have a role in the future. Okay, so that's essentially my topic sentence. It's not the first sentence in this paragraph, it's the second sentence. My first sentence is acknowledging the other side. So, and I'm not saying you're right, because that would make my position hard to defend. If I'm saying, yeah, you're right, but I don't agree. I'm saying, yeah, you have a point, but your point is not related to my opinion. Your point, I've considered your point, and I still don't agree because of the following reasons. So teachers' experience and expertise in integrating curriculum design and delivery, assessment, offering assistance with technology, and the support and encouragement given to students, particularly when students encounter difficulties when learning, are all an integral part of the classroom experience, which cannot be matched by technology alone. So I'm saying, yes, I've considered the idea that computers and access to information are great, but there are all these other things that the teachers do the technology alone cannot do, so we still need teachers. So there's my first reason. And if you think about the types of information I've offered, if you think about examples, explanations, talking about the other point of view, the types of information you can put in a body paragraph to develop your answer. I've essentially got acknowledging the other point of view, explaining why it's wrong and what the actual question is, and then giving some explanation or examples of what teachers do that is outside the realm of simply having access to technology. So it's basically just explaining the situation and why I think what I think. And when you write different body paragraphs, you may come up with different ideas. So some of them you may come up with examples. For example, some of them you may have a lot of like explaining the situation and then further explaining the situation. Some of them you may be balancing it with talking about the other side and why it's either wrong or not relevant to your position. So the type of information you have in a body paragraph can be varied, and you should tailor it to what your ideas are and the best way to present them. And again, the way you do that is lots of practice. Okay, so let's look at the second body paragraph. Remember, my point from my introduction is teachers are an essential part of technology-based education. So what we find in this paragraph should further that idea. Just as in traditional learning, computer-based learning is enhanced by the social aspects of the learning process. So here's my topic sentence. What we can expect is to find information about the social aspects of the learning process and how those are going to affect someone's ability to learn in the context of this computer-based education scenario. So the education of primary school students in particular involves much more than learning facts and information, and social development through interaction with other students is a vital part of education at this young age. So I'm saying, okay, so if we go to one extreme with young kids, just having technology isn't going to work because so much of their education is not related to information or access to information, but developing skills and things like this. So that's why this argument doesn't really apply to young kids. And then I say, even for older students, for whom the greater independence and self-discipline required by extensive technology-based education is a realistic expectation, learning is still a social experience that benefits from human contact. So again, here's another place where I'm acknowledging the other side of the argument. So if I said, yeah, it won't work for very young kids because of the reasons I mentioned, and the other person came back and said, yeah, okay, but for older kids, it will definitely, teachers won't be necessary. And my response is that, okay, older kids, yeah, they've got some characteristics that would really help in a situation where you had only access to information and you didn't have a teacher. So again, they're more independent. They've got the discipline required perhaps to find the information on their own. Sure, but still, learning is a social experience, and even these people who can access information on their own need the social aspect of learning to help them learn. Now, am I right? Am I wrong? Who knows? Lots of people would agree or disagree with me. The point is, am I making a convincing argument that's believable and that's related to the question I'm being asked? And the answer to that is yes. Last sentence. While much of the social activity related to learning occurs in groups of students, teachers are responsible for designing, supporting, and mediating classroom activities, computer-based or otherwise, where this type of learning thrives. So again, I'm saying, sure, social learning isn't only a function of the teacher. It happens in groups of people, but teachers have a role in designing that type of learning, designing those types of situations and monitoring them and making sure that everything happens. So yeah, even though the social aspect of learning isn't only related to the teacher has a really essential role. And that's why, again, remember the question is, will there be any point in having a teacher? Will we need teachers in the future? And I'm very clearly saying yes and explaining why. Okay, so we've talked about what the problem is, what the viewpoint is, what my opinion is, and why. At our conclusion, what we should do is remind the reader what I think and why I think it. So in conclusion, while the job of the teacher will undoubtedly continue to change due to the influence of technology in education, I strongly believe that their guidance will remain a fundamental part of the education process. Okay, so remember, the ideas that I talked about are their role in the social aspect of learning and their other roles in terms of designing and their other roles in terms of facilitating the learning process. So I can think about that as their guidance. So that's just a simple way to summarize all of those ideas. Their guidance will remain a fundamental part of the education process. So that's, again, what I think and why I think it. Here too, we have a slight acknowledgement of the other side. So I'm making it clear that I don't believe that, in the future, the role of the teacher won't be different because of technology. That's not the question we're talking about. What we're talking about is whether teachers will be necessary. And again, I'm saying, sure, the role of the teacher will change because of technology, but teachers will still be necessary, again, for the reasons that I've discussed in this essay. There you have a good summary of what I think and why I think it. And so you can see there are, several places in the essay where I've acknowledged the other point of view. So one here in the first body paragraph, again in the second body paragraph, and again in the conclusion. Actually twice in the second body paragraph, and then again in the conclusion. So those are 4 places where I haven't taken a middle view. I haven't said I agree with the people. I'm just pointing out the other point of view in relation to my opinion to explain what I think and why I think it and how I have considered this option when I've come to my own opinion. And so therefore I still believe what I believe because of these reasons. So again, this is simply just making a more well-rounded, well-considered argument, which is going to help in terms of task response. Now, if you scroll down, you'll see another version of the essay with various words and phrases highlighted, less common vocabulary, referencing and cohesive devices, types of opinion language. In lessons 5, 6, and 8, I went into quite a lot of detail about what these things mean and why they're important. So I'm not going to go over every single one here because it's quite a long and slightly tedious process, but I would recommend that you read this essay for some good topic-specific vocabulary that you can think of, and also to see, how these things are used. And again, lessons 5, 6, and 8 have a broader discussion of why those things are important in the context of an IELTS essay. Okay, so there you have a lesson on the important things to keep in mind when you're writing IELTS opinion essays. So make sure the following concepts are clear in your mind. The difference between taking one side or the other versus a middle position, and the importance of mentioning the other side in relation to your views. And finally, when and when it is not appropriate to use the phrase I completely agree or I completely disagree, and why that's important in your writing. So if you keep all of those things in mind, give yourself a bit of extra time if this is new information for you, so that when you practice, you can easily incorporate these ideas into your approach to opinion essays. So it is really important that you do these things, and the higher score you need, the more important it is. So keep those things in mind, do plenty of practice, and you should do well when you get to the real exam.